Hey, g'day people, it's Matt here from Matt Carves. So we are looking at burrs today. I'm going to use these two carvings. This one's out of cedar and this one's out of a New Zealand wood called Remu. Okay, so what burrs are we going to be using today? We're going to be using these three Kutzall Burrs. This is your typical flame burr. A lot of people use this a lot. This is the taper burr, a fine, and a sphere burr that is also fine. And I'll put all the details in the description. And the diamond burrs that we're going to be using, we're going to be using actually quite a few. This is a set that I got off Master Carver. I really like it. I'm not an affiliate with them. I just really like the quality of them. And also this burr here, which is a Dremel wheel point, really good for little fine details. And also this lot of burrs that I have bought just recently off Amazon, and I'll put the link to that. Really good for undercuts and flattening out kind of things as well. And the last burr that we're going to use is a cutter burr from Dremel as well. And just a quick note here, those two burrs are from Dremel. Now they are quite expensive and you may be able to find cheaper kind of options, but just look at the shape of them. So when you find the cheaper ones, sort of go for a really small sphere and a cutter sort of burr with a sharp edge. Okay, so what we tend to do when we first start carving is we will block out the general shape of a carving, and we want to do this with the burr that removes the most amount of wood, and in this case it is the Kutzall flame burr. Now you may have been watching other channels and they use this burr as well because, well, it is actually a really good burr to use. And one point to remember when using the Kutzall flame burr is it's really good at actually putting in concaves, but not so great at doing convexes. So well, let's have a look at that and how we can get around it and what we can do about it. Okay, so we're going to flip over to that other carving in the background just to show you. So the convex is a little bit tricky. So the trick is to actually move the flame burr over the top very lightly and very quickly as well. Now we can use the point of the burr to get a definition line in as well. We're going for that outside of the cheek there. So I'm not like pushing really hard, but you can sort of see I'm using that point to get it a bit more sort of like of a V shape in there. And then I'll probably go in and round that V shape off. I could do this with the flame burr, but I'm going to show you how it's done with other burrs. Okay, so you could either use the fine sphere burr here or the fine taper burr. So what we're trying to do is round off that area. So what if I was using the taper burr, I'd sort of like use it in that action like that, but we're going to use the sphere burr. Now it's the same trick for doing with the flame burr. You sort of see there, if I was to push it in one area, it's going to leave a concave, but if I just press it lightly and go over it quickly, it's going to make it into a convex. And the beauty of using the finer burrs is they aren't going to take off so much, so they're more controllable and they leave a better finish as well. Now sticking with that sphere burr, you can sort of see me using it on the other carving. I'm just sort of like leveling things out and it's very sort of controllable and all of that, so I'm going around the eyes and the nose. And I don't want to take too much off, and that's why I want to kind of stay away from the Kutzall burr. Now I'm going to sort of like round off the point of the nose, and this is really nice for doing this because you're trying to get a really even roundness around it. That's hard to say. And so you can sort of see me going around it there, using the word around a little bit too much, so I will move on to the next burr. And you can see me there, I am using the Kutzall taper burr, which is also a fine, so it's not going to take off too much. Now if you ever find your burrs are burning the wood, you can like use them with a lighter touch, or you can slow the Dremel down as well. So this one is very good for those little details and sketching it in shapes as well. And you can see me here, I am sketching in the shape of the eye. And if you want to see a eye carving, I will leave a link for it in the top right hand corner and also in the description on this video. So you may be thinking you go from one Kutzall bit to the next. Well, you actually jump around a lot. So here I am going, when the carving is quite a long way along, I'm going in and I'm putting some details around the eye. Now I want to put in a little bag under the eye. I want to make it a little bit more prominent. So I'm going in with that Kutzall taper burr, and I'm just putting a bit of pressure there on the tip. And you can sort of see the bag is sticking out a little bit more. Now the wood is playing, well, not playing up, but it's just doing what it does, and that is looking a little bit severe. Not the bag, but just that little bit underneath it. So now we want to smooth that out, so I might go to the sphere burr. And while I'm using the sphere burr, I'll be moving it quickly over that area just to sort of so it doesn't leave indentations. So you can sort of see me there. I'm using it almost like a painting brush, just putting in light strokes. So now if you want to put in even more finer details into that bag, I would go to sort of a diamond bit. And we're going to have a look at a few different ones here. The first one we're going to look at is this pointy one. It's really good for sort of like it's like a pencil. You're putting in sort of sharp lines with it. But also you can use the sort of like side, so you get a little bit of roundness there as well. So you can sort of see how I'm using it there, just puts a little bit more detail into those little areas. Got to be careful that you don't push it into the wood too much, because it will kind of leave a hole like a drill. Okay, so we're going to have a look at these T-shaped burrs now. So you can I'm just using that point there to show you can use different surfaces. So you can use that top bit, you can use the side bit, and you can actually use that bit on the back of it as well. So here I'm using the top of the burr just to sort of like smooth out the top eyelid, which is quite a difficult thing to do with other burrs. Sometimes it's hard to get into areas on the eye, and sometimes you'll have to change burrs just to get into a really tight space. Now you don't want to do this. I'm sort of like going to put a line in above the eyelid. You don't want to sort of put a really severe one in. I tend to do like this. It's gone a bit fuzzy there. Like little tiny lines, and it's a tiny little bit more natural, hard to explain. But sometimes if it doesn't work out, then I will take out some of the line just so it doesn't look so severe. Okay, sort of you can see me putting in a line there, and it's actually a little bit too severe. You can't quite see it from that angle. Where's a good angle? So there, it just doesn't look right. It's kind of straight. So I'm going to go in and just sort of like try and take it out a little bit with that burr, maybe from the top. Always change the angles of your carving, so I'm just sort of like going back and forwards in the line just to sort of take it out and sort of like I don't know what's the word for it, sort of like make it less severe, I guess. I can't think of the words at the moment. So okay, so that looks a little bit better fractionally. And these burrs are really, really good for doing undercuts. Say if you're putting a hat on a face, I find it sort of like you can go in between the hat and the skin and put in a really fine line. So you sort of see there, and I'm going back in and I'm actually taking out the surface of the skin just so it sort of like sits a little bit better, doesn't look so severe under that line. And I'm using the top of the burr for that. Sorry about the focus there. So you can sort of see a little bit better there. And these burrs are very good for straightening up the eyelids. I like to put a little bit of a flat plane on the eyelid, just so it catches the light, especially on that bottom one. You can sort of see it there. This is actually a pretty small eye, so it's pretty hard to show you on camera what I'm doing here. But just light touches. And you can sort of see in that corner there, it's a little bit difficult. That's not really working out too well, that eye in the corner. So I might go down a size in that burr and try and... Oh, I don't know what I'm doing here. I've forgotten what I did. Oh, that's right. So I'm trying to put in a line. It's not really working out that well. So I put in a line on the top, and then I'll try and join up that line on the bottom to the top line. Something like that anyway. My cameraman is terrible as well. Now you can actually put a line underneath the eyelid as well, so in between the pupil and the eyelid, or the skin and the eyelid. So you can sort of see it there. They're very steady hands. Okay, and just putting a line in under that. And I'm also sort of like trying to flatten out that pupil as well as put a line under the eyelid as well. Sorry about the focus there, but when you get really close like this, and I'm just using a my Samsung S10 for this. Now we're going to look at how we use a really small sphere burr. What the benefit of this is, it can sort of like, I guess, smooth out sharp lines that you don't really want, that look a little bit severe and not natural. And I just go in with this and sort of like play around with it, sort of like, it's like a little bit of an eraser. And you can take off fuzzy bits as well. Again, I am really touching very lightly on everything, and I couldn't quite get in with any of the other burrs in this really tight area in the eye. So now I'm using this tiny sphere burr. So it's looking pretty good in there, and that eyelid is looking pretty good. And I might use it to define that bottom lid a little bit more and smooth out those little bags under there, just so they look a little bit rounder, I think. Now you don't want to sort of make them perfectly round, or sort of like, I'm sort of getting to that point that maybe it's getting a little bit too sort of like perfect under there. So I might rough it up as well. Going into the pupil there, I just saw a little bit of fuzziness there, so I might take that out. You got to remember too that this video, I'm just sort of like freestyling it. I'm sort of like telling you how it is in real carving. I could give you like 10 real quick tips, but I'm just sort of like showing you the actual process of how I carve with these different burrs. So I'm not quite sure what I'm doing there. There's a problem with talkovers, is you sort of forget what you're actually doing, and then when it comes to, hey, and my memory's going because I even forgot what the sentence, how it was going to end. But anyway, maybe we'll just move on. Okay, so I'm going to shape the beard now. So I've gone back to the Kutzall flame burr, and I just tend to try and get in a real good general shape of the beard with a few little details. I might put in a few sort of like valleys in with the Kutzall flame burr. And once I've done that, then I tend to go in with this burr here. Now, I quite like big lines when it comes to beards. I don't like lots of tiny little lines. You might be different. You might want tiny little lines, and that's cool. But I'm putting in big lines, like I guess a lot of whittlers do this, and gouge carvers. So I'm putting in some really big sort of like S lines here, and then I'm going to sort of like tighten them up with a diamond burr. So you can sort of see the cutter burr there. It's really nice for smoothing out surfaces, and a lot of people use them for hardwoods. I tend to use them very sparingly. I spend a little bit more money on these Dremel bits, so I don't tend to use them to block out anything. I just tend to use them for sort of like putting in details like this. This is cedar, so this isn't really going to dull this Kutzall. Oh, it's not a Kutzall. This Dremel cutter burr. And the reason why it's gold is apparently like it's supposed to last twice as long as the other Dremel cutter burrs. And now I'm going back to those T-shaped burrs, and I'm sort of like putting in details and smoothing out the finish, and I tend to put in a few more little lines if that's needed. So I'm just trying to like figure out, I keep on looking at the bed and then I think, oh yeah, it needs a line there. So you can sort of see, because this is such soft wood, the diamond burr is easily cutting into it. And you can sort of get sort of like deeper lines with this burr as well. It's just a matter of sort of like going on one angle and then the other angle to sort of form a sort of V shape. You can spend a lot of time doing the bed. It all depends on sort of like what you want it to look like. I think that's starting to look pretty good. You want sort of like it to be non-uniform. You want sort of like bits finishing halfway down the face and bits finishing sort of all the way down the face and all of those kind of things. Just keep on sort of playing at it. Sometimes the problem with cedar is if you make it too fine, it will crack and break. But that's okay, because then you can just sort of adjust it. Okay, so I know I haven't used all of those diamond burrs from Master Carver, but that second one is great for finishing works, and also those other two as well, depending all on the shape of what you're aiming for. So I'm using that flame burr here to sort of work on those gargoyle eyes. I'm using it actually just to lighten it up because I put a wood dye on it, and now I'm bringing out the whiteness of the eyes to make it contrast against the rest of the gargoyle. So if you wanted to see this video, why don't you click on this link right here. Hey, thank you for watching.